Good evening. My name is Pat Loader, and I'm the Executive Director of the Compassionate Friends. I want to welcome you to this webinar, Siblings Grieve Too. Let me just mention before we start that all attendees are muted. To ask a question, you'll need to type it into your question area on your screen's control panel. Our presenter tonight is Dr. Heidi Horsley, and she's being joined this evening by her mother, Dr. Gloria Horsley. They are the founders of Open to Hope Foundation and host of the radio program Open to Hope. Heidi is a licensed psychologist and a social worker, and Gloria is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Welcome, Heidi and Gloria.
Thank you, Pat. Welcome, everybody, and welcome especially to my siblings out there. This is Dr. Heidi, and I am here with my mom, Dr. Gloria, and we're so excited to be able to do something on siblings tonight. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Heidi. It's great to be talking to you, and what a great topic we've got tonight, how great it is to be able to be invited by Compassionate Friends to do this. I'm very excited.
Absolutely. One of the things I love about Compassionate Friends is that they are giving voice to the sibling experience, and they have such a big presence with siblings at all of their Compassionate Friends national conferences, and a lot of things dedicated to our loss and the sibling loss, and many, many people don't. So we will be talking today about why our loss is unique, and a shout out to all the siblings listening and their parents.
Yeah, and Heidi, I want to say that I know for the parents out there, it is a huge concern for us. What's going to go on with our kids? How are they going to deal with their siblings dying? Big concern, and we are interested in dealing with that parent concern.
Yes, that's why I thought it was a great idea to have you on, Mom. Initially, you know, when Pat Loader, the Executive Director at Compassionate Friends, said, Heidi, will you do this? I really wanted to do it. And then I thought twice about it. I was going to do it alone, and I thought, you know what? We also need to have the parent voice out there because you have concerns that I can answer and that people can, you know, type in an answer about, you know, your concerns about what you're worried about with your surviving siblings. I want to start out today with a quote which I really like, which I think really captures the sibling experience. And it goes like this. When you lose a parent, you lose part of your past. When you lose a child, you lose part of your future. When you lose a sibling, you lose both. The sibling bond is so incredibly powerful. And your siblings are part of your past, they're part of your present, and you expect them to be part of your future. I know all the siblings out there listening completely understand what I'm saying. My story with sibling loss started when I was 20 years old, and I got a call. I found out in the middle of the night, actually, that my 17-year-old brother and cousin have been driving in a car. Matthew, my cousin, was driving. The car hydroplaned. My brother was a passenger. It blew up, and both 17-year-old boys were instantly killed. My brother is on the left right here on the screen, and Matthew and Scott are together in their Boy Scout uniforms. Suddenly, my world was completely turned upside down. Here I am, only 20 years old, and my baby brother, who I thought I was going to have in my life for the rest of my life, was suddenly gone. And, you know, our siblings are part of our past. We expect to grow old with them. I expected to graduate with him. I expected to have kids with him. I expected to attend his graduations. I expected to grow old with him. And, in fact, I expected to die 3 years before him. But suddenly here he was gone. The pain was so, so great that I didn't know how I was going to survive or even if I wanted to, and I honestly thought I would die of a broken heart. And, Mom, you may want to chime in here, you know, because you already know all this because you lived it too and you saw what I was going through and what we were all going through as a family.
You're really concerned about those other siblings. You're off to college, you have a 14-year-old, or people have younger kids, and you really are concerned how those siblings are grieving. I'll have to say a sibling died in our town recently, and I was really interested in how the other siblings, the other community supported the siblings. But when you're a parent, you don't know what's going on at school and all those kinds of things. So this information about siblings is really important if you've had a loss because you're kind of at a loss yourself on what's going on with your kids and what's happening, what their feelings are about their siblings.
And like you said, Mom, you had 3 surviving daughters. My brother was the only boy in the family. I was 20 at the time. My sister Rebecca was 19. Heather was 14. Scott was right in the middle. He was 17. So you had these 3 girls, and like you said, 2 of us were in college, so you didn't really know what was going on with us. And Heather was a teenager, and so it sounds like you didn't really know if all 3 of us were getting enough support or not.
Absolutely. I think there's so much going on behind the scenes, and I have been kind of amazed at how kids do come forward and help each other, and you don't realize that you feel like, as a parent, you're the only one there taking care of the whole situation. But when kids are in school, a lot of the day, their friends are there supporting them too. So it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. And so there are places where people are getting support, and then sometimes you don't get support. Because, you know, sibling loss is a unique experience, and the reality is most siblings in this country do not have siblings that die until they're old. So, I mean, to have a sibling die young is a very unique experience. And I wanted to talk more about what makes sibling relationships unique. Because our loss is so minimized, I don't think people realize. I mean, everybody out there, think about your siblings, whether you've had a loss or not. And if you've had a loss, you understand how unique it is. But it's interesting when you look at the statistics, because most siblings in the U.S. will spend 80 to 100% of their life with each other. 80 to 100%. That's a huge amount, right? I mean, that's our whole life. And yet here I was at 20 with the brother that was already dead, and he was my baby brother, my younger brother, who I actually thought I would die before him. So, you know, it's interesting looking at that stat. You're going to spend 80 to 100% of your lifespan with each other, and you will only spend 40 to 60% of your lifetime with your parents, because the natural order of things is that our grandparents die first, then our parents, and then our children. And like you and me know, Mom, we were out of that natural order.
You know, and Heidi, I think it's also tough for siblings out there who there were only 2 kids in the family, and now they're basically only children. And with smaller families, you know, that can really happen. So that person that you've had there in your life is no longer there.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is, when we have a brother and sister, we have a shared history. We are parallel travelers in life. Scott knew things about me no one else will ever know, ever. So our siblings know things about us nobody else will ever know. And like you said, Mom, if there's 2 kids in the family and all of a sudden there's one, that is your go-to person. I mean, your only sibling is now gone. And it puts a lot of stress on children, whether they're adults or it doesn't matter the age. It puts a lot of stress on children when suddenly they are left as the only living child in the family. So yeah, it brings up a whole bunch of stuff. When we look at the uniqueness of the sibling relationship, you know, our siblings, they have so many roles in our lives. It's incredible the amount of roles they play, and I'm just listing a few here. They serve as role models. They're our protectors, because they protect us, we protect them. We confide in them, especially about our parents. If our parents
I was going to say that. It's kind of a common enemy, your parents, right?
Yeah.
Scott would call you up and ask you what we were, you know, you would call him up and ask him, I remember what we were up to and all that kind of thing, because he was kind of a nosy guy.
Right. I mean, if your parents are being a pain in the neck, you go to each other and go, gosh, Mom's really annoying me today, or whatever. Your sibling is the only one that really gets that, because they grow up in your family and they understand on a deep level about the family dynamics. So you confide in them.
There's a loyalty there, too. You know, you don't want to say bad things about your parents to other people, but your sibling gets it.
I agree with you, Mom, completely. There are playmates, obviously. We wrestle with them, we play with them, we play games, etc. And there are rivals. We try on different hats with them. We try on different personalities. We try on different things. We tease each other. The sibling relationship is extremely complex. It's complicated. It's interesting because they did a study, Mom, at Penn State, and they said, we devote 33% of our free time with our siblings, even if we don't like them. 33%. It doesn't matter. So more time than you will spend with your friends, your parents, or your teachers.
You know, Heidi, that reminds me of that Craig Scott story where his sister Rachel was killed at Columbine, and they had a huge fight before, and he felt so guilty about it. And finally, after a year, he told his dad about it and started to have some real healing. But the fact was he was fighting with his sister. He hated her that morning.
Right, and we're going to talk a lot about that in this webinar, because the reality is we fight with our siblings because we love them. Yes, it's true. We fight with them because we love them, because and it's complicated. So if I didn't love you, if I didn't care about you, I wouldn't fight with you. I wouldn't even give you any energy. I wouldn't even have you on my radar screen. But that's why it's complicated, because we fight with siblings at times, even in the best of sibling relationships we fight, when they die, there's often unfinished business, because you have these very complicated relationships with your siblings. So,
and you don't, if they don't, when they die, you don't have a chance to work those all the way through. I had a sister that I didn't get along with for years, and now as adults, we're great friends.
Well, that's the other thing I always say to people that I work with, et cetera. You don't know what your relationship would look like in the future. You may have worked things through, et cetera. As we get older and we mature and we become adults, sometimes we work through things. But if siblings die young, you're often not given that chance. So it's interesting knowing the amount of time that we spend with our siblings and the importance of the sibling bond and the sibling relationship. The interesting part to me is how, despite all of this, siblings are the forgotten mourners. We are the forgotten mourners. And we are often overlooked, ignored, and unacknowledged. And every single sibling that's on this call is nodding their head right now and saying yes, yes, yes. And all you have to do is think about the amount of sympathy and condolence cards you got after your sibling died and the amount that went to your parents. And there's not one person, I bet, on this line that's got more sympathy cards as a sibling than their parents. I got one.
I was thinking, Heidi, that you can even remember the name of the person that sent you the one.
Totally. Brigitte Finnerty
me.
gave me one sympathy card. My parents got thousands.
We had bushel baskets full.
Baskets full and baskets full and baskets full. And what's interesting about this is I have been working with 9/11 siblings that lost firefighter brothers in the Trade Center for 10 years. And I actually thought it would be different. I thought, here you have the 9/11 terrorist attack. I bet you those siblings got a ton of sympathy cards from all over the world, and they didn't. They didn't. Their parents did, but they didn't. So, it doesn't matter how people die, et cetera. We still do not get acknowledged. Even though the
one of the things that I think is happening now, though, Heidi, is that with Facebook, people are connecting up in different ways now and coming online and talking about it. And yeah, I think kids are probably getting more support in that way right now than they have in previous times.
I totally agree with you, Mom. And I think part of what's going on is that we as siblings are teaching the world how to be good grief support. How are we doing that? We're going on to Facebook. We're going online and we're saying, I miss my brother today. And we're giving people permission to support us. And they are. Like you said, they're coming on the internet and supporting us. So I think as siblings, part of our job is to teach the world and not expect the world to be psychic, because we need to teach them what we need. And I often go on and say stuff about Scott on his birthday, on the day he died. I'll put little things on Facebook. And like you said, people, it's amazing all the support I get. I love the internet for that reason. Because like you said, people are coming on, Mom. They are supporting each other.
Yeah, I know there's a lot going on with this girl in our neighborhood who died, and a lot of Facebook stuff. And your nephew, Scott, who's named after Scott, has been spending a great deal of time with her. And I think it is because he understands from his mom losing her sibling what it means, which is pretty amazing.
Absolutely. And maybe he realizes that when someone has a loss, rather than sending a card is great, but sending yourself speaks volumes. That's really the best gift you can give somebody, is to send yourself after a loss. So some of the common issues that siblings face. Okay, so our task and our role, no matter, once we are, let's say, 12 and above, is separating from our family. And we keep doing it as we get older and older and older, even into adulthood, and becoming more autonomous. And after a loss, I don't care if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, after a loss, your parents become more protective, oftentimes. Not all of them, but many of them. And I get that. They become overprotective because in their world, children die, and their children die, and they're afraid and scared that, my God, I've lost one child. I don't want to lose another child. The problem is that often causes conflict in the family because, you know, your parents become too overprotective and too fearful that another child is going to die. And I hear siblings over and over and over and saying, look, you've got to let me live my life. You've got to let me be a regular person growing up. You've got to let me have my own experiences.
Yeah, it's a scary thing being a parent losing one child and then worrying about the other one. It feels like a really dangerous world, and depending on how they died, you know, if they died in an accident or an infection or whatever, you know, you feel like very concerned that the same thing's going to happen, more protective. It's tough.
Well, I'm wondering, Mom, for you. Okay, so when Scott died, I was 20. I already had my driver's license. Rebecca was 19. She had her driver's license, but Heather was only 14. And Scott died in a car accident. I'm wondering for you, and I've never asked you this question, what was it like when she turned 16 and started driving for you? Did you have any anxiety? Were you worried, what if she got in a car accident, or what if she was with the driver that got in a car accident?
Well, this is going to surprise you because Scott wasn't driving. I was happy to have her drive. I felt that if Scott had been driving, it would have been safer. You know, you have all these little ideas in your mind. So I felt like she was responsible. She understood about her brother, and I was glad when she was driving and could drive herself.
And what about when she was with her friend? What about when she was with her friends driving? Did you get concerned about that or not?
Yeah,
really?
I thought that was very concerning. I was much more concerned if I knew she was going out with friends and they were going to be driving. Much more concerned.
So if she was a passenger, you would be more concerned.
Yep, and always we said, you know, if there's any problems or if you feel like somebody's been drinking or out of control or whatever, please call us. Don't ever, you know, get in with somebody. Even though Matthew, the one who was driving the car, was not using drugs or drinking or anything, he was just on a rainy road, the car hydroplaned, and it hit a wall and blew up. You know, you just can't control everything in life, but as parents, you try to control what you can. But in my head, I was glad that she had, when she learned how to drive, so she could drive herself.
And you know, the reality is, as you all know, everybody out there knows, bad things happen to good people, and things happen for no reason sometimes. I mean, so yeah, it is interesting because, you know, what's interesting to me is here, I did not lose a child, but I lost a sibling. But now that I have children, my son is 14, and I already have anxiety about him driving, which is interesting to me, which just shows you how a sibling loss impacts your life in different ways, depending on how old you are, forever. And that doesn't mean we can't find hope again and joy again, and I definitely have. But I actually do have anxiety around my son driving, and I would not have that anxiety had my brother never died in a car accident. So it is interesting.
I was just thinking, you know, we were talking earlier about the younger kids too, and maybe we can just throw this in about, you know, we're talking kind of about teens, but I'm sure all the parents out there who have had kids die of choking or drowning when they're younger kids or infection or whatever, I'm sure they're watching everything that goes on with their other kids, or, you know, if they died, sudden crib death or something, you know, all those things are going to put you on high alert for and increase anxiety about those same kinds of situations.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. And we've got to be careful, though, that we don't get so anxious that we make our kids anxious and don't allow them to live a regular childhood and have a regular life and a normal life. And that's one of the things I hear over and over and over when I work with siblings. And I love going to Compassionate Friends and doing a sibling workshop and saying, siblings, what do you want your parents to know? And then going into the parents and telling them. And one of the things siblings say over and over and over, no matter what age, we deserve to have a regular childhood and a regular life. You know, we don't want to have our parents' anxiety thrust on us constantly. And I know it's hard. I understand where the parents are coming from, but just to let them know that. So looking at how siblings grieve, I think this is really interesting. One of the biggest questions I get, and you know this, Mom, one of the very biggest questions I get is, my child doesn't look like they're grieving. They don't show me any tears or any sign that they are grieving in front of me, so they must not be grieving. I'm terrified that they're not grieving. The biggest question. And so, you know, when I talk to the siblings and voice this concern to them, they say, and I already knew this because it's what I did, we are grieving, but we're just not grieving in front of our parents for many, many reasons. And one of the main reasons is we're trying to be good kids. How are we trying to be good kids? Our parents have been through a horrific loss. They've lost one of their children. We don't want to cause them any more pain. If we grieve in front of them, they're going to start grieving, and it's going to be painful for them to see us in our grief. So we're trying to hide our grief from them. I totally identify with that, because when Scott died and I saw the excruciating pain that you and Dad were in, I tried to hide my tears from you guys. I tried to hide my pain because you had lost your only son and you were in such a bad state that I didn't want to cause more pain for you.
Right. Yeah. When you are in such an incredibly bad state, I remember Heather going to the mall with me after Scott died, and I was like a zombie, and she was holding my arm, walking me around the mall, and she was kind of like a little bit annoyed. I remember she kind of shook me, and she wanted the parents she had, the mother she had, and the mother wasn't there, and it is a really difficult situation. I can see where, in a way, too, at that time, I was in such bad shape. Somebody had to be in charge of walking around the mall, and it wasn't me.
Well, that's the other good point you're making. Losing a sibling is a double loss. We lose not only our sibling, but we lose the family we once knew. Because the family that I had wasn't the one I signed up for. It wasn't the one I wanted. It was the one that I all of a sudden got. Because you lose the emotional availability of the parents, at least at the beginning. They're not the parents you once knew because they're in such a bad place, and it's scary. I was 20, and it was scary for me because I was like, my parents are suffering so much. I wonder if they're ever going to be okay again. Are they going to be able to take care of us? I mean, it gets scary when you see parents at that level of pain. No matter how old you are, I think it's scary. And I think the other piece is sometimes siblings don't want to grieve in front of their parents because they don't want to regress in front of their parents, especially if they're teens or in their 20s. We're growing up, we're trying to be adults, and we don't want to kind of regress and have our parents go, oh, sweetie, it's going to be okay, and hug us, and then we'll get in the worst place. And that is definitely another thing I've seen in my own experience and working with siblings. So I think the thing I would love to tell the world, and the siblings out there listening know this, and please pass this along to anyone that doesn't know that's a parent, we're grieving. We grieve on our own time, with friends, on the internet, in the shower, in our bedrooms at night, in the car, alone, etc. We are grieving even though we may not look like it. We may look just fine on the outside, but you don't know what we look like on the inside. And on the inside, we miss our brother and sister so incredibly.
But on the other hand, Heidi, I would say also, and I think you'd agree with me, to parents out there, your kids are doing their thing. They're doing okay. They're going to be okay. Because you get the feeling that they're not going to be okay, and they are. They're going to be okay.
Because parents are worried that the sibling loss will destroy their children's lives. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, yeah. And when you say that they're grieving, they're not grieving all the time. They're grieving in spurts, and
Right.
They're going to be all right. Because you do really worry that they're not going to be all right. My pediatrician came to visit us, David. You know him, David Broadbent, and he said to me, Gloria, your kids are going to be all right. There's some biology driving them, and they're going to go on and do their thing. So don't worry about them. And I remember that all these years later, it made me feel better because I was worried that it was going to destroy them.
Well, it's interesting because it's a two-edged sword. We want our grief to be acknowledged, and we want it to be validated, but sometimes we get annoyed when people talk about it. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic that's going on. Like you said, eventually siblings, we do survive, and I always say, well, my loss has defined my life. In no way has it destroyed my life. However, that being said, early on, I honestly believed it was going to destroy my life. I honestly believed it was, Mom. Scott was such an important part of my life, I didn't know how I was going to go on. And that's why we're here today, to give people a lifeline that aren't sure how they're going to go on and aren't sure if they're ever going to be happy again and if they're going to find hope. that we've been there. So we get that.
Absolutely, and we have a great life now. Fabulous.
So let's look at some normal responses to grief, which I think are interesting. I think these are interesting because sometimes parents don't understand this part. At least that's been my experience. Anger. Anger is grieving. I love parents that come to me and say, Heidi, my kids aren't grieving, and they're so mad that they're not grieving. I said, that's grief. That's how grief manifests in a lot of people. It's a legitimate emotion. I was mad as hell. My brother died. I know my siblings out there listening feel the same way. I didn't sign up for that life. I wanted him in my life. I was angry that he abandoned me. Was that a rational thought? No. Is grief rational? No. So it's a very legitimate emotion. And it needs to be addressed if turned against self or others. That's where we need to be careful. If you're hurting yourself or hurting somebody else, then we need to talk about that. I remember really well, I was with the 9/11 siblings, and we were doing a lot of grief workshops. And there was a guy in there that was really, really angry, and he kept saying, why do I have to work through my anger, Heidi? I don't have to. And 2 weeks after he said that, his appendix burst. So, you know, sometimes anger can take a toll physically on us. We have to be very careful that it doesn't get to that point where it's hurting us.
And people teenagers can be very angry, particularly if they feel that their sibling had some responsibility in their own death, you know, in an automobile accident or a suicide, or, you know, just doing some irresponsible, what they saw as being irresponsible, or they might even make it up irresponsible because it's not fair to them. I mean, they're teenagers. They're supposed to be able to do their thing, and here this sibling has screwed them up, and they don't even want to feel as sad about it as they do. And I think that's particularly, there's a boy in this picture, and I think for guys sometimes they can really feel like, you know, that energy and that male energy wanting to, you know, move on and do things, and this just isn't right.
Well, the thing is, anger is a safer emotion than getting beneath the anger. So if you go beneath the anger, it's a sad, helpless, hopeless feeling. And anger at least feels like it's got some power behind it. And so I think sometimes people would rather embrace that. And so we need to find appropriate ways to manage the anger, obviously. Working out, getting punching bags, writing, I mean, getting it out somehow, I think is really, really helpful for people.
And we know that guys tend to grieve shoulder to shoulder, not face to face. The girls might talk about it more. And I was just saying, my grandson has been spending a lot of time with this teenage girl. His sister died. And my daughter was laughing because she said he just listens to her. She talks and he listens to her. And I think that's kind of what guys do. They listen more than they talk. You know, they may say a few things, but I think that when you approach your teenage boys who've had a sibling loss, you might want to do something physical with them, like play some basketball or something.
I don't even think it needs to be a teenager. I think it can be any age boy.
Right.
Like you said, being active, shoulder to shoulder, is the way that a lot of guys like to talk about stuff. They like to be doers. They like to do things. I mean, for the guys out there listening, you know what I'm talking about. So, yes, those conversations can happen. Incredible conversations can happen shoulder to shoulder. We as women love to look at guys in the eyes, and we like to get all these. You know, I always joke with my husband saying, honey, if you can hear me once, grunt once. If you agree, grunt once. If you don't agree, grunt twice. And he's like, why do you need all this feedback? So, you know, women and men are a little different. I'm stereotyping here, but women give a little more yes, nonverbal. And like you said, the best conversations often with guys happen shoulder to shoulder, which I love. The other thing we see with, go on. I'm sorry, Mama.
I was going to say, in a guy, you know, guy's typical thing is, wow, I just broke up with my girlfriend. Isn't that great? I'm going to go to the gym and work out. And then they go down to the basement and cry.
Right, right. And in fact, for anybody out there, we've written a great book. If you want to read a great book on men and grief, it's called Real Men Do Cry, written by an NFL quarterback who is a real guy. He was NFL quarterback for the Detroit Lions for almost 10 years, and his son died by suicide, and he did not know how he was going to survive. And it's his story of going from the depths of hell, from prison, because he had 3 DUIs, to finding hope again after loss. So it's a really good story for any men out there. If you are a guy or if you know a guy, it's a great read for them. The other normal response for grief, so, normal sibling response is anger, very normal. I was very angry, very normal. Survivor guilt is a completely normal response. And every time I talk to siblings, we all sit there and go, yes, we feel guilty for many, many reasons. I mean, for me, I felt guilty because my brother was the only boy in the family, and there were 3 girls. He was the star athlete. He was adored by his sisters. There was some sibling rivalry between me and my sister, a lot of sibling rivalry, actually, while we were growing up, and he wasn't part of any of that. So, I felt guilty that the only boy died and that the 3 girls were still here, and I felt like it should have been me. And, some siblings carry some blame. Maybe I said something wrong to them,
Yeah.
etc.
I know Heather felt like she should have been in the car with them, and she should have gone with them. So, different things like that. Feeling like I was working with one kid whose father died, and she said if I'd had my dad work on this hadn't had him work on the math problem with me, he wouldn't have been on the road at that time, and he wouldn't have been killed. So there are all sorts of ways we make up stories about how something wouldn't have happened and how we were responsible. So I think it's a kind of a way of trying to control our world.
I totally agree with you, Mom. And the idea of wishing we didn't fight before your sibling died is a common theme. Because, like I said, even in the best of sibling relationships, we argue. Because it's safe to argue with your sibling. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to be out of your life. So, you're around them a lot. Of course, you're not always going to get along. But what happens when you're in the middle of a fight, like Craig Scott was at Columbine, and your sibling dies? It's very complicated. I also work with a lot of people that didn't get along with their siblings. And, then they all of a sudden died before they could work out these issues. And so they're left with all this unfinished business. And they're surprised at how much they miss their sibling, even though they often didn't get along.
So I would suggest, Heidi, to parents out there, and I think it's almost kids age 7 on up, I would use this opportunity of listening to this webinar to say to my child, I was on this webinar and they said kids feel guilty sometimes when their sibling dies. Can you relate to that at all? Just throw it out there and see. You might be surprised what you'll find.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And it might not even be kids. It could be kids, young adults, any sibling.
Absolutely.
Any age sibling. So because we have complicated relationships, I have a quote which I love, and it goes like this. It says, siblings may be ambivalent about their relationships in life, but in death, the power of their bond strangles the surviving heart. Death reminds us that we are part of the same river, the same flow from the same source, rushing towards the same destiny. Were you close? Yes, but we didn't know it then. Sometimes it takes a death of a sibling to realize how close you were to your sibling. And I see that over and over and over again with all the thousands of siblings I've worked with. So it is a complicated relationship. So how do we find hope after a sibling death, given all this? That is the big question. And, Mom, you'll like this. What we've really found out, my mom and I, by doing the Open to Hope radio show, where we've done hundreds and hundreds of sibling loss shows. You can go on our site, opentohope.com, and listen to these shows. We have found that one of the most important things in shifting your energy and not only finding hope after a sibling death, but keeping it, is to move toward an active style of coping with grief. We need to move towards action, right, Mom?
Yep, we want to empower people. There's too much not empowering. What we're doing today is we're giving you information. That information is empowering you to move on with your grief journey. So that's what we want to do with everybody, is empower you.
Yes, because the thing about it is, when you've had a loss, how do you feel? You feel like a victim. I felt like a victim. I felt like something had been done to me. I felt hopeless. I felt hopeless. I felt disempowered. All I wanted to do is curl up in a fetal position for the rest of my life and not move. And the only thing that changed that and that shifted that energy at all was to slowly, very slowly, start moving in an active way towards service and coping with grief in an active way. And at first, it was very small. It may be just finding someone else that had had a loss and hugging them. It could be that little. Like my mom always says, that maybe going to a Compassionate Friends meeting and doing something, bringing something, a couple of cookies or whatever, something small. You start out small and turn your grief outward towards an active style of coping.
Which is really important with kids and siblings, because they need to be active. And I think one of the things we've talked about, Heidi, when you know that the sibling is having problems, is when they become less active in the things that they've done in the past.
Yes. If a sibling absolutely excels at not one thing in their life, nothing, and they're isolating and not excelling in any area, then I would be concerned, and I would probably say go see a counselor and just make sure that your kid is okay if you're worried about them. There are a lot of creative things you can do after a sibling loss, which have helped me and a lot of the people I've worked with. Expressing ourselves through art. Music is wonderful. I love music. You can get positive things, positive songs. You can get your crying songs. I've got so many songs that remind me of Scott. He loved Neil Young. So I'm playing some songs on the guitar right now, Mom, that remind me of Scott. So, I mean, it's a little, Neil Young, old man, and Morning is Broken. I'm learning how to play it on the guitar. It was sung at his funeral. So, I mean, these are songs that make me feel close to him and that he loved. Writing, physical activities, journaling, going onto the Internet. You've said that, Mom. And getting support. These are active ways that we can grieve. Also, bereavement groups can be very effective. So, Mom, do you want to say anything about bereavement groups? We've talked
oh, my gosh, bereavement groups. Yeah, it's kind of tough to get a teenager to a bereavement group. And if you can get them there, people always tell me it's great and very successful. And, if you feel like that counseling is needed, I know we've got that on the slide here, go yourself. And if you've got a really good counselor, find a family therapist who does family work. They'll get your children to come if you feel like they really need to come to that kind of a group. So, but, grief is normal. And what I love is the Costa Mesa Compassionate Friends conference this year, because it's by Disneyland. I mean Disneyland, and you can get your kids to come because they can go to the Disneyland activity or whatever, but find something that you can do to get kids to the group if you feel like that needs to be done. I think groups are really great for people. Some schools have them, but I'm not sure that everyone needs therapy. I don't know, Heidi, you went, Rebecca went, Heather went, because I was a therapist. I got everybody all cranked up to go, and you guys went, and nobody got much out of it, right?
I want to say a couple things. One is the therapist thing. Goodness of fit is everything. The guy that I went to was not a good fit for me. Did not work. I did not like him. He didn't want to hear about the trauma. I don't really think he could deal with my story. I didn't think he wanted to hear the truth. And you would think therapists can hear the truth. Well, some of them can't, okay? So he wanted to talk about the day I was born. Well, I needed to talk about the fact that my brother, who I thought was going to be in my life forever, had just died in a traumatic car accident. He couldn't deal with that. So that didn't work for me. But I want to say, so goodness of fit, shop around. Go to one therapist. If they don't work, another, till you feel like this person understands grief and loss. They get it. They're not going to pathologize me. They're going to help me and support me. That's what you want. But like my mom said, counseling may not be needed. And if you think if you're a parent out there listening and you think your child needs it and you're worried, go yourself. That's the best way to do it if the child won't go. Now, as far as bereavement groups, there's a lot of people out there listening right now that are young adults or adults. And this is great because this webinar is for everybody, not just teens. And I want to say about the Compassionate Friends group is Compassionate Friends says over and over and over the same thing. You need to go to a group 3 times before you make a decision on whether or not you're going to stay. Whether you're 60 or 20, you need to go 3 times. Because the first time, you're going to want to get the hell out of there. I'm telling you. It's going to be a lot to hear everybody's stories. But just hang tough and hang tight and just give it 2 more times and then make a decision. Because often on the 3rd time, you'll be like, okay, you know what? I actually like this is working for me, or I'm identifying with some of the people. So
Heidi, you're talking about goodness of fit, and the reality is that there may be a goodness of fit group for your child, speaking as a parent, in your community too. So you want to look around. If Compassionate Friends group doesn't have a sibling group that you think fits for them in your community, then check with your local hospice, check with your hospital. Spend a little time looking around and seeing if you can find a group. And by the way, there's some wonderful camps that you can go online and look at for kids now. There are great camps. The Moyer Foundation, that's Moyer. Go online and look at it. They have camps for kids, and there's some wonderful, wonderful bereavement camps around it and great experiences, and a lot of them are free.
That's a great idea, and I just want to say two other things. One is that, I live here in Midtown Manhattan, Staten Island. For any of you out there, I love my Staten Island people. Babe, hello, if you're out there. But they have a fabulous sibling program. The Compassionate Friends sibling group out there is really strong. There's some Compassionate Friends chapters that have really strong sibling components. And the other thing is, Compassionate Friends has a Facebook page, Sounds of the Siblings, which I love. And I don't even log, I go on there and just kind of creep. In other words, for those of you who don't know what creeping is, I know a lot of my siblings know what it is. It means I'm a voyeur, okay? I go and look at the page for support, but I don't necessarily say anything. It's fabulous. And Tracy, who's on our board, is there. She's the one that kind of is always on there. And, it's a fabulous place to go if you want support. So you can go no further than Facebook. So,
Heidi, I wanted to ask you a question. Do you want to start taking questions now? Because
I would love to. Yes, please,
yeah,
please. For any of you out there, thanks, Mom. Please come in with questions, comments, etc. Hopefully I'll be able to see them. I'm not sure.
I think we have to ask Pat. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we do. This is actually from an older sibling, and it's how do you support your parents while you're dealing with your own grief as a sibling?
Ooh, that's a hard one.
Isn't that a hard one? Yeah.
Yes.
You know what I want to say as a parent? Take care of yourself. The more you can take care of yourself and support yourself, your parents they'll have to find their own journey. But if they can see you doing better, then it will be good for them. They've got to do their own thing. The first year, you've got to live it. You just have to live that year. You have to go through the first of everything. You have to go through all the experiences. Your parents are going to take a different journey than you are. You've got your own thing. It's going to help me to see that you're taking care of yourself.
Well, and the hard part is, it's so interesting that a sibling asked that question because it's such a sibling question, because society tells us that we need to be strong for our parents. And when we say, I had a brother that died to people, they say, oh my gosh, that must be so hard for your parents. Very, very rarely, if ever, does anyone say, wow, that must be really hard for you. So we are getting messages constantly that we need to support our parents first and shelf our own grief. So, Mom, I love that you're saying that we can take care of ourselves. We have the right to our grief. It's a legitimate thing. We lost our sibling. And
Absolutely.
we need to take care of ourselves.
There may be some parents out there that want you to take care of them, but you're going to have to, find your own space there with that. And sometimes maybe you'll have to tell them no, and maybe you'll have to tell them that you're not going to be able to come over on Memorial Day this year. You're going to go out with some friends or whatever. Tell your parents, even though they're bereaved, tell them in advance. People may not like it, but that's tough. You got to take care of yourself. In the end, they're going to be happy to see that.
And, for me what was hard, and it's really even hard having this conversation with you about what I'm going to say, because, I was 20 and I needed to be living a normal 20-year-old life. And so that meant I needed to grieve, but then I needed to act normal. In other words, I needed to act like a 20-year-old. I needed to find my new normal, actually. But sometimes you and Dad, and I understand this now as an adult, sometimes you and Dad would want to talk for long periods of time about Scott's death. And it would stress me out because I didn't want to go there for that long, because I needed to also have my regular 20-year-old life. So it was kind of a, like you're saying, sometimes we as siblings kind of need to figure out ways to be able to be engaged in our regular life too.
Well, yeah, and I think that you said it before, even you and I working together on the radio show or doing speeches or something, sometimes somebody said to you, Heidi, you really need to come out a little bit stronger about something, and you said, well, I have to have respect for my mother.
Right.
So, so there's that whole thing going on too. So you have to find that space. But I will tell you, in general, you need to take care of yourself. You need to decide what's most important when you're bereaved, no matter who you are.
So, Pat, are there any more questions?
Yeah, how about this one from Tracy? How do you talk to your children about the grief they're feeling over the loss of their siblings? I'm giving you tough questions tonight, aren't I?
Well, how do you talk to them about the grief they're feeling? That's getting into saying, how do you feel about? I don't know. That sounds like that question that we're overly worried as a parent about talking to them about the grief. Oh, maybe the grief the person is feeling, like Pat. If I'm feeling grief, or do you think it's talking to them about their grief?
I think it's. I think what they're asking is talking to their child about their siblings. The loss of their sibling. How do you bring up the conversation, in other words, with your surviving child?
One of the things I love, and my mom and I have said before, is I like saying to kids, if you're a parent, you know what? I know what it's like to lose a child, but I don't know what it's like to lose a sibling, if that is true. I don't know what it's like to lose a sibling, and I'm here for you if you need me. I'm here for you because, it must be really hard to lose a sibling. Your brother and your sister were a big part of your life. So just kind of putting a statement out there, I'm here if you want to talk about it. I'm here if you need me. It's hard to be a sibling. I just went on a webinar tonight, this is what you could say to them right now, and I found out that sometimes siblings, their loss isn't talked about. It's not acknowledged, and I'm here for you because you know what? This is just as much your loss as it is mine. This was your brother or sister, and this is a really big deal, so I'm here if you need me.
And did you hear what Heidi just said? I'm here if you need me. End of discussion. Don't expect them to respond to you. Short sound bites. Teens don't grieve on and on and on and on. They do it in short sound bites. Don't trap them in the car and ask them how they feel about it. Don't trap them somewhere. But don't be afraid to throw out these statements. I really miss Scott today. Or I don't know how you're feeling, but I really miss Scott today. And then don't expect them to talk about it. But, they need breaks from it, too. And I don't know exactly what, I think sometimes parents, I don't know, it's hard to say what is regular teenage behavior and what is bereaved behavior, because you don't expect your kid to talk on and on about, something that's gone on at school, or sometimes they will and sometimes they won't. So you've got a hot topic that you want discussed. It's pretty hard.
I think this fits right in with what you're saying. We have a sibling who says, I don't want my parents to think that I don't care. I just don't like talking about it all the time. Very true.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. If that sibling could give that exact statement to the parents, that's all they need to hear. See, oftentimes the perfect statement is in our heads and we're not giving voice to it. If that sibling could go to them and say, you know what, exactly what you just said, Pat, I don't want you to think I don't care about my brother or sister and that I don't miss them. I do a lot. I just don't want to talk about it, or I'm not comfortable talking about it, or I don't always talk about it because I'm trying to be a regular kid. But just know that I miss them, and et cetera. Exactly what you said is what this person needs to say.
I was just thinking, Heidi, I almost think as a teen you could write that on something and put it on, and tag it up on your wall in your room or on a bulletin board or something. I love my sibling, but I can't talk about it all the time. I need to take a break sometimes.
Right.
Even saying that to yourself, so that you realize that you don't have to talk, about it.
Just because we're not talking doesn't mean we don't miss them. We're not grieving, and we don't care about them, and we're not in a great deal of pain. Sometimes we're just not saying it.
Right, and I think that one of the things sometimes, and you said it, that adults can talk about things longer and longer and longer than kids can. And you even made, I won't even go into the details, but you made a geographical move because we had people who wanted to talk about it.
Yes, I did. I was living quite close to my parents, and I ended up looking at a map and saying, let's see, California's here, New York is there. Leaving on a jet plane. I loved my parents, but the intensity of their grief was overwhelming to me, and I did need to distance myself. You have to remember, I was 20. I did need a geographical distance, and I loved them so much.
Time.
I felt like I needed to take care of them, and I felt responsible, and that was just my stuff. They weren't putting that on me. We as siblings just automatically take it on, even though our parents aren't putting it on us. So, yes, Mom, you did notice that. This is the first time you've ever said anything.
What can I say? California and you're in New York. Do we have any more questions, Beth?
Yeah, this one is interesting. It says, I have been avoiding visiting my brother's grave for almost a year. For a year now since the funeral. I am terrified and fear how I may react to seeing his grave. I make it a goal to see my brother's grave by this upcoming Memorial weekend so that I can seek closure. That's a tough word right there. What should I do to conquer my fear of visiting his gravesite when I have no real family support to go with me?
Wow. The first thing I want to say is, I say it all the time, closure is for bank accounts, not love accounts. Going to the grave will not give you closure, in my opinion, because we incorporate our brothers and sisters into our lives in new and different ways through continuing our bonds. You know, my mom can chime in on this too, but I would really reach out to the sibling community, maybe on Facebook, and post this question, because you are going to find an amazing, supportive community out there. Personally, I absolutely hate the cemetery. I never go, and I find no comfort. That's my own honest opinion. It doesn't work for me, so different things work for different people. I know, Mom, you can probably chime in.
Well, I would think about if they really have set this as a goal and it's something they want to do, and if they feel like it's a hurdle that they want to get over, hey, that's fine. I would really do some desensitization stuff. If this is really something, first you talk to somebody about it. Then you get in your car and maybe drive close to the cemetery. Or you get in your car and you drive up to the cemetery and you don't get out. And maybe you drive up to the cemetery and you get out and you walk around the edges and you don't go up to the grave. Maybe, I don't know how close you can get to the grave. Scott's grave, we can get right by it. So then you drive up to the grave and you don't get out of the car. And then next time you drive up and you get out of the car. You just keep desensitizing yourself if that's
I like
what you
that,
want to do.
And you bring supportive people with you. And I also know people that if they're over 21, they bring the person's favorite beer. And they have they drink it for them, or they bring, the person's favorite Diet Coke or whatever. You can do little rituals that are kind of fun at the cemetery too, that will kind of lighten it up a little if you're really anxious. Maybe just also look at pictures of the gravestone, etc. beforehand. I like what you're saying, Mom, to kind of get yourself prepared, and also bring some trusted friends with you. You don't have to do this alone.
No, and there's somebody who would go if you have a minister or somebody who knew them or whatever. I mean, people would be happy to go do that with you. And if you feel embarrassed about having them do it, then do your little, activities in advance to desensitize yourself. And, you need to take a look at why you don't want to go, what it is for you, and see where that is.
And it is hard to go because, it is hard because going to the cemetery just reconfirms that our siblings are dead. And that's a hard reality, especially if they haven't been dead that long. This is permanent. This is our new life. This is forever. And we need to find our new normal and open the next chapter, and it's going to be without our siblings on the earth. And that's a hard reality.
Right. You have to come to terms with it, that it's a different life, and maybe that's what really you don't want to come to terms with that yet. So good luck on that.
Yeah, our heart goes out to you.
Facebook, the Facebook Compassionate Friends would be a good place to put that on. Let us know on there what happens.
Okay. We have a couple of people, Heidi, that ask that you repeat the a Facebook group for siblings.
It's Compassionate Friends, the Sounds of the Siblings. If you go into Facebook and put in the Compassionate Friends, you'll see the Facebook page. If you can't find it, then email me. And my email is drheidihorsley@gmail.com. If you can't find that, if you don't remember that, just Google me and you'll find my contact info. But yeah, there's a Facebook page. And there's also a bunch of other Facebook pages that are geographical. There's a lot of Compassionate Friends Facebook pages for siblings. So put it in and you'll see them.
Okay.
They're great.
All right. Any more questions, or is that it?
Oh, we have lots more questions, but I know you need to continue on with the webinar.
Oh, you know, I thought we'd just finish up. Didn't you, Hyde?
Yeah, I think
go through all the slides. I think we just finished.
Okay.
I definitely don't need to go through all the slides. I mean, I could go through, let me go through the one that says advice from bereaved siblings, Pat. It's the one that's almost at the end. It's like not that one. That's just that we need to tell people that we're going to get through this together as a family. Okay, now I have asked many, many siblings over the years for advice that they wanted people to know about. So this is what they want people to know. So for our siblings out there, you already know what it is. And for our parents, this is what we want you to know. Number one, we are grieving, even though we may not look like it. Acknowledge and validate our loss. That's what we want. We want the world to know how hard it is to lose a sibling, because our siblings are parallel travelers in our lives. Avoid cliches, and all of you can relate to this. We don't want to be told, at least it was fast, at least you didn't suffer, at least you had him for 17 years. It was God's will, God needed another angel, etc., etc., etc. That minimizes our loss. Don't expect us to have closure. I've said this before. And I said that this has defined our lives, but it has not destroyed our lives. Don't compare grief. Don't compare grief, because when you compare it and say, well, I had a child that died and it was so difficult, it makes us feel that we don't have a right to our own grief. The worst loss that is happening to you and that can ever happen to you is the one that has kicked you down, knocked you to the ground, that is so devastating that you don't know how you're going to survive. That's the worst loss you can ever have. And for me, that has been the loss of my brother Scott. So, this is really good. And Mom, I've talked to you about this. Have memorials, pictures, and reminders around the house about the person that died. We love that. But please, please, please make sure you have just as many pictures of us, because we're counting. And, you know, if you're going to have 500 pictures of Scott, which my parents didn't, but if you were, I want 500 pictures. It's really important that we know that we're still an important part of your life. And also, siblings need places in the house where they can take a break from their grief. They need places that do not have any reminders, because they need to concentrate and they need to study and they need to take breaks. So that's it. So I don't know. Do we have time for one more question? I know we're running out of time.
Yeah. How about this? We have a question about, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find, we have so many questions. People are very, very interested in the things you've said tonight, and I really appreciate it. But here is a question from somebody that should she be concerned that she's never heard her son speak his sibling's name after nearly 15 years. He's not spoken her name. Should she be concerned?
Should you be concerned? I would be concerned, but I happen to know some people who decided to do that. Their son was killed in an accident, and we went to visit them, and the man pulled my husband aside and said, "We never speak my son's name." So, you know, it's hard to know what's going on in that guy's head or what's going on in that world. Would you be concerned, Heidi?
I would need to know more about this person that they're concerned about, and if they are excelling in other areas of their life. And I would still say to the family, even if the sibling isn't speaking the name, still bring the name up and make it okay to say the name out loud, because maybe someday that sibling will be in a place where they're able to say the name. We need to let people know that it's not taboo.
Yeah, I was going to say Heather did not get involved with Scott's loss until many years later, and now she's very involved with our foundation. So sometimes it takes a long time for people. But I would say we've got a holiday coming up. We have Memorial Day. If you're around that child who's not saying the name, give a toast to your daughter at that time and just drop it there. Bring up the name yourself and, say I miss them or whatever. And you never know. It takes many years for people.
Absolutely. And if you want to know more about sibling loss and the unique experiences of siblings, please listen to some of our sibling radio shows. They are archived 24/7, and we talk all about these issues and many, many more.
And you can find those where?
At www.opentohope.com.
Great.
And Pat,
Thank you.
Thank you for having this conversation and for validating and acknowledging our sibling loss.
Well, I certainly hope that everybody got as much out of this as I did tonight. It was a fabulous webinar. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Pat, from Gloria, and thank you for all the work you do for Compassionate Friends and for all the bereaved people around the world.
Thank you. To our audience, our webinars can be viewed on TCF's website at www.compassionatefriends.org. Again, Heidi, Gloria, thank you so much for being with us tonight, and I'll have to say good night now. Thank you.